Welcome to the Circling the Wagons podcast, the only podcast to take the controversial stance. Kelvin Benjamin kind of has a point.
I like it.
Here's your host and lifelong Bills fan, Nate.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo! Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo!
The Bills make me wanna shout.
Welcome to the Circling the Wagons podcast, a podcast discussing the Bills all year round with interviews, news, recaps, and insightful fan discussion. Most times. Here's your host and lifelong Bills fan, Nate.
Hey, Bills fans, Bills Mafia, and fellow preseason jumpers to conclusions. Welcome to another episode of the Circling the Wagons podcast, the only podcast that will give you a preseason game recap and also a true life story of a Bills player getting hazed in training camp this season. We have a ton of things to discuss in this episode, including the Bills' first preseason game recap, the quarterback situation as it pertains to Josh Allen, the Corey Coleman trade, the aforementioned rookie hazing, and a lot more if we get the time. If you are new to our podcast, please check out our interview with undrafted rookie defensive end Mike Love out of the University of South Florida. We discuss his playing style, what it's like behind the walls of a Bills locker room with Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, what he's overcome to get where he is. He's really a truly inspiring story. He came from a household with 3 brothers and a single mom, and now he's got a master's degree and is playing in the NFL. So it's pretty crazy. He's a really good dude. I hope you guys listen to it, and I hope it's someone you guys keep an eye out for as the preseason continues. But before we get into the first preseason game recap, are you guys all ready for the season to start? What better way than to grab some awesome Bills gear that's not $40 a t-shirt and goes to a good cause? Check out tpublic.com/stores/CTW pod. Now, the CTW pod is Charlie Tango Whiskey Pod. It's like our Twitter account, if you're following us there. On the TeePublic site, our podcast has created 6 or 7 different Bills-themed art pieces that can be put on almost anything, any color or size t-shirt, a coffee mug, a cell phone case, wall art, travel bag, whatever. Our pieces include the popular Trust the Process, Bills head coach logo, the Bills Hall of Famers banner, right in time for the Hall of Fame game this past week, and our always popular Circling the Wagons podcast logo. So show off your Bills fan pride with your family, your friends, and everything before the season starts. And remember, we donate a portion of all proceeds to Hunter's Hope, Jim Kelly's charity to help newborn screening. So I'm actually joined by a good friend of mine, a Bills fan, and our new podcast announcer, Nick. Nick, it is great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Nate. I'm a long-time listener, first-time guest. Go Bills, man.
Yeah.
Nice to see him back on the field.
How does it feel for football to actually get started again? It felt a little weird. It's always that weird time, like where summer's still going on. We're still in the thick of summer, but the season's about to start, you know?
But it's just nice to see him actually playing football as opposed to looking, with the draft, you're seeing all these things. You might see some tapes of things, the training camp, you're kind of watching that, but it's like, this is a game.
Yeah.
It's actually fun to watch.
It's fun to watch. And you're not watching, their actual plays that they're going to run during the season or anything like that, but it's still great to see football. And normally, as it pertains to preseason, the first game is usually the most boring game because the starting quarterback, quote unquote starting quarterback, only plays a couple series and then is out. I mean, that was the case with Cam Newton. And in this game for us, we didn't even know who the starting quarterback was going to be until he took the field. So I thought that was...
take it, he did.
Yes, he did. He did a very good job. So we're going to get into that. Normally, so when you're looking at a preseason game in general, I think the most important thing, above anything, you want to look for a few things, but it's injuries. You want to make sure that your team came out not injured because, even if they look like garbage, that's not necessarily how they're going to look in the season. If they look great, that's not necessarily how they're going to look in the season. But if somebody gets injured, then it really puts a big bruise on the entire night and it kind of ruins the experience. But so far, so good. Knock on wood, everything's going well. We're in the fourth quarter as we're recording and watching a little bit of Josh Allen as he's basically playing the second half of this game. So we'll get into Josh Allen a little bit later on. But I mean, before the game, so before we even started this game, I mean, what were things that you were looking for as far as, things that you were interested in? I knew a new offense was being deployed, so I was interested in seeing how the offense was going to perform because last year was very lackluster. It was their biggest weakness. So I wanted to see, A, could they run the ball? B, could they pass the ball? Could they protect the quarterback? Are these quarterbacks going to hold on to the ball too long? Are they going to make terrible reads? I mean, what was something that you were looking for?
Well, it was exactly the same thing. Earlier this week, I was reading a little bit about the training camp and whatnot, and they're talking about how much more complex, with Brian Daboll, his schemes are much more complex than last year, which probably isn't too tough to be more complex. But I was kind of curious to see how much of that would be shown on the field tonight and see how they really executed. And, for the most part, it looked pretty good.
Yeah, I was very impressed. I think more so than I thought I would be for the offense. I mean, what you've been reading about in practice and seeing clips of is the defense is doing really well. Now, you hope that's just a case of the defense just being a really good defense, a stout defense, better than last season, as opposed to the offense being that bad. And tonight, I know they were going against, second and third teamers a lot, but I mean, I thought Nate Peterman looked good. So, I mean, let's get right into that part instead of like what you were looking for. The starters of the game so far. I mean, the quarterback, which we didn't know going into it, it ended up being Nathan Peterman. Nathan Peterman had a good outing. He was 9 for 10? 120 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The only incompletion came at the very end of his, second or third series or the end of the first quarter. I believe he took the whole first quarter. Is that right? Or
it was pretty close to it.
First 2 series or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then AJ McCarron played the rest of the half. And then second half, Josh Allen has pretty much been playing. But I thought Peterman looked pretty good. I didn't think necessarily he was going to be the starter the way that A.J. McCarron had been taking first-team reps for a lot of this week. So that was kind of a surprise. And I thought he did pretty well overall. What did you think about seeing Nate?
Well, record-setting quarterback Peterman. Actually, he looked a lot better than what I was fearing might happen, which would be a repeat of the infamous 5-interception first half. But no, he looked great. He looked right on point. I would say, not to take too much away or too much off the bloom off the rose, is he threw it all the time to the biggest guy on the field.
Yeah, Kelvin Benjamin.
Kelvin Benjamin was a beast tonight, and he looked great. But is that really the true test of a quarterback to see if he can throw it to the guy who's 2 feet taller than whoever's covering him? He looked great, though. I think it was a strong start and very interesting to see how this will go down the line as these preseason games continue and the camp battle continues.
It was nice to see Peterman throw those quick out passes, maybe a couple over the middle, I think. That one pass to the sidelines for Kelvin Benjamin when Kelvin Benjamin was a really great catch. It was a great pass on the run. It was a great catch. There was also that touchdown that got called back, Rod Streeter, which I thought was a great deep ball. I mean, it had perfect touch on it. I mean, people always questioned his ability to throw the ball and to make a long pass. That was a pretty decent pass. I think it was like 40, 45 yards.
He had a lot of pocket presence, too.
Yeah.
He wasn't scattering out of the pocket. That could be obviously the function of the offensive line doing their job, but he seemed to really hang in there and to, like you said, make those throws with some touch.
Mm-hmm. And he eventually did get a pretty deep pass to Kelvin Benjamin for the touchdown, which, like you said, Kelvin Benjamin looked great. We might get into that a little bit later, the Kelvin Benjamin, Cam Newton stuff. But yeah, I think that they kind of went out to prove something, and I was very happy with the offensive line. Now, on the offensive line, the starters there, which we weren't really sure who it was going to be going into it, ended up being Deion Dawkins, which we knew was going to be the starting left tackle, but then it went Vlad Ducasse, Ryan Groy, John Miller, and Jordan Mills. So we weren't 100% sure how that was going to go, and I thought that they did a really good job protecting and then getting some running lanes for what ended up being Travaris Cadet and a little bit of Chris Ivory, too. So that was I was impressed a lot. As far as I'm concerned, in general, between Peterman, the starting offense, and even A.J. McCarron and his offense, I think they far exceeded my expectations of where I thought they would be or where they were last season.
And one of the things I was reading earlier this week on NFL.com, they were pointing out some of the different attributes to some of the other teams, and they said that the Bills had the thinnest offense coming into this. So I think that's exactly what you're saying, is a little bit surprised how well things meshed together, at least for the first half, and the offensive line definitely was a surprise considering that's a whole new crew.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm 100% on board with you there.
Now, you and I talked about this while we were watching the game, and I mean, you have to take last season to a point as far as the offensive line, the running game, the passing game, with a grain of salt, because we have a new offensive coordinator. Brian Dable is in there. And we've seen, even with Sean McDermott coming in, how much coaching really matters. I mean, we've been in such a rut before the drought was ended it's like we just don't have enough talent. Like, that was always an excuse. We don't have enough talent. And whereas, Sean McDermott comes in, they basically drain, a quarter of the talent off the team, basically, just for draft picks. And they ended up, ending the playoff drought. So it can't be understated how important coaching really is when it comes down to it. And hopefully this is a sign that, I mean, you can't get much worse than Rick Tennyson as far as creativity, as far as play calling and, using players in the correct capacity. I think that was a huge issue that he had as far as the offensive lineman, not building the scheme towards his players' strengths. He was like, this is what I run. I run a zone blocking scheme or whatever he decided. And then, he didn't change it to, okay, what are they really good at? What's their strengths? What's this quarterback strength? Tyrod's not good under center, so let's have him play in shotgun. I mean,
And this is the thing that's bothered me for the last 2 years. I mean, we've had this conversation and argument over and over and over, and it's totally coaching. I mean, you look at Belichick. He's got a good team every year. It's not because he's always got the best players. It's because he knows how to coach. And I'm a big fan of the movies like, Necessary Roughness, The Replacements, these teams where you're bringing the ragtag group of people together, and it's not so much they're the best players, it's that they come together as a team. And I think that's what happened a little bit last year, in that they did come together as a team kind of unexpectedly, because they did drain a lot of the resources, which, again, I have opinions here and there that it would take a lot of time to go through. Mm-hmm. But I think that was why they did make the playoffs, is because they were fighting as a team. And I think that goes to the coaching, the process of McDermott and having a good room, having guys who support each other in terms of that. But I think if you were to ask any of the coaches last year, they're like, yeah, we're not making the playoffs. This is rebuilding. Mm-hmm. And they've even said that this year. They've made a lot of comments to make sure that we know we're still rebuilding, people.
Yeah, it's the process isn't done. Yeah,
don't expect anything. And I mean, hopefully they get to the playoffs again, but they're already building up the excuses there. It's like, no, let's just see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to let's get into that a little bit after we do a quick recap of this preseason game, and let's start off. Do you want to start off and talk about the Cam Newton Kelvin Benjamin video, like, before the game? I think that's kind of interesting. It has nothing to do with the game whatsoever. Or does it?
I think you've got to back up even a little bit more to the comments that Kelvin Benjamin made earlier, and he said something to the effect of that Cam Newton is very inaccurate and he doesn't have very good knowledge of the game.
Yes, exactly. And he was upset that he didn't think he should have been drafted by the Carolina Panthers, which is kind of interesting because Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were part of the coaching staff that drafted him, and it was kind of weird, the timing of it, because it hasn't been quite a year since he's been traded, but I mean, usually that's something that you would say right after, like immediate visceral gut reaction. Whereas now it's been, 7-8 months.
He's taking it as a feeling of, I feel good here in this organization. I didn't feel good in that organization, and he's feeling it now in camp, and he just wants to tick off Cam Newton, which is altogether possible.
I like your thought of it being a positive thing, but I bet you know what it is too, is because he's in a contract year right now. If they don't give him the 5th year extension, there's probably a good part of him that's thinking, I'd be making so much more money right now if Cam Newton, threw me there. If I had bigger numbers, if I had something to show that I was worth $15 million a year, if I was getting the Julio Jones contract, which I'm sure in his mind he's as talented or close to being as talented.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
So I mean, when you look back at that, I mean, just look at Jordan Matthews. I mean, Jordan Matthews was having a pretty decent career up until he came to the Bills, and then he got injured in the first 15 minutes of training camp. He lost, and then he signed for like a 1-year vet minimum contract with the Patriots, and now he's just got cut. So I'm sure he's looking around and he's like, well, there's a guy who wasn't the top of his draft class, but he was in to make some money and he got almost nothing. So, I mean, and then it's just like anything, like your job, if you're not doing well, you have to find an excuse, right? I'm sure this is his excuse. Cam Newton wasn't throwing me the ball well. He wasn't accurate. I couldn't just, my numbers were, T.O. always used to make that comparison. Was it T.O.?
It sounds like T.O. Even if it wasn't, it sounds like T.O. would do that.
Yeah. But yeah, so he said these words, which were very, poignant. And afterwards, actually, Sean McDermott said that it wasn't. He was upset that Kelvin Benjamin had said these things, and it's not the way he wanted to.
They gave him a talking to.
And yeah, so what happened is I'm listening. So I'm driving home, and I'm listening to the Bills Roundtable with Chris Brown and Showing the Bulldog, and they kind of stop their little roundtable for. They said, Kelvin Benjamin's talking to Cam Newton. And it was like pregame warm-ups, right? The no pads, nothing. They're just out in T-shirt and shorts. He's like, we're just going to kind of watch this. I'm kind of interested to see where this is going. They're over at the 40-yard line. They're kind of talking to each other, although that didn't look like it ended very well. So we get home, and Bleacher Report obviously tweeted out a video right away. So Nick and I are watching it, and Cam Newton comes over. So first of all, there's a guy right in Kelvin Benjamin's ear this whole time. Now, I don't know if he's a Carolina Panthers player. He was kind of smirking, so you don't know if he's just like, man, I can't believe you said that, or if he's just like, what is wrong with you?
It kind of felt like he was ready to jump in the middle if something were to
explode. Because Cam Newton comes right over. He comes for come here, give me, I don't know, like a grasp handshake, right?
The one-armed bro hug.
The one-armed bro hug, So...
And that wasn't happening.
That was not happening. Kelvin Benjamin basically didn't do it. And then Cam Newton was not happy about that.
He said some stuff.
And they were kind of like, a few inches away from each other. And it was kind of like, it wasn't positive, but it wasn't
explosive.
It wasn't explosive, but it was more like,
It was definitely some feelings.
Someone on Twitter had tweeted out, I said that was kind of weird that happened. And it said, it looked like Cam Newton came to, greet him. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you think. He came to greet him. He could have been like, hey, what's up, you piece of shit? Thanks for throwing me under the bus. And Kelvin Benjamin's like, man, get out of here, And that's
what it looked like, too. It looked like Kelvin Benjamin's like, all right, man, whatever. And then he starts walking away. And Cam Newton now, lets him get a few steps back. But then he starts pursuing, and you can tell he's saying some more stuff. And Kelvin Benjamin's just like, let it go. Let it go. We're just playing some football. And he just keeps pursuing further than you would have expected. And you would, I don't know why it would behoove Cam to be all excited like that, because it really felt like it was coming from that was my take, is it felt like he was the one that had more feelings about it than Kelvin.
Oh yeah, well of course he did, because Kelvin was criticizing Cam Newton, basically saying how terrible a quarterback. But let's not mince words with Cam Newton. I kind of like Cam Newton, but he's never been an accurate quarterback. I don't think anyone's ever confused him. That's why when Josh Allen was coming out, he had completion percentage, accuracy issues, and his big comparison was Cam Newton, because you got a big, tall guy who's mobile, who has a strong arm, but isn't it so accurate?
Which kind of makes Kelvin Benjamin's comments a little more confounding, because he's talking about how that was such a bad thing when he was in Carolina, and now he's coming into a system to where that's the savior.
The guy that's comparable to the guy where he just came from, yeah.
So that seems a little odd, unless he's just made such a good relationship with one of the other two guys that are going to start this year that he feels okay about it.
Well, the way the quarterbacks were playing, they seemed to be pretty accurate. And, even saying that, so it was very childish of Cam, I thought, and it was like Benjamin was trying to walk away. It was a little weird and awkward. And so, it came out, and Cam did not dispel any inaccuracy issues that Kelvin Benjamin said, because he came out and he was missing guys left and right. Almost had a couple of picks, So the only completions that he was really having were just backfields or running backs coming out of the backfield. So, I kind of got to agree with Benjamin on that one.
Yeah, from a truth perspective, he seemed to be right on point.
Peterman was way more accurate than Cam Newton today.
Now, was it appropriate for him to mouth off like that? It's like, I don't know. It was fun for us.
It's fun for us, yeah. I got a kick out of it.
And he wasn't going after any of his teammates, so, that's not a problem either. So I was okay with it.
But I guess, and I hate saying this, but I always more so subscribe to the philosophy of not giving another team bulletin board material, because they're already motivated. If you give them that extra motivation of like, this guy said this about you, like they don't respect you, so you need to show them. It like kind of gives it that. So I mean, it was a preseason game. That doesn't matter on the year. Luckily, it doesn't matter. They're not going to play them in the regular season, but in the regular season, I hope that they don't do that.
And I would agree with you on that. This being a preseason game, it's completely fine. But if it were a regular season game, I could have a different opinion of that. So no, I agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm. So going back into there's a great catch by Benjamin that we mentioned for first down. Overall in the game, I mean, the defense looked okay against the first team offense, against Cam Newton in the first team offense. I thought the defense looked pretty good.
It's tough to tell. He's so inaccurate.
Yeah, against an accurate quarterback, who knows how they do. So I thought they looked pretty decent. Harrison Phillips got the start. Kyle Williams didn't really play. Harrison Phillips did end up getting a sack tonight, which looked great. He came off the field holding his arm. You're like, oh, great. This is all we need. Again, luckily, it didn't seem like any serious injuries had happened, so we were happy with that. Marcus Murphy, by the way, I thought he looked amazing tonight as the third or fourth string running back, really, behind, McCoy, Ivory, Cadet, and then he was the fourth one in. So, he had some moves, man. He had some quickness that, it reminds me more of McCoy than, like, I think Ivory's probably more of a plotter and more of a contact sort of runner. Marcus Murphy just had, and he showed that at the very tail end of last season, because he came in halfway through the game when LaShawn McCoy went out. And obviously, no matter what, the backup running back this season is going to be, it's going to be head and shoulders above Mike Tolbert last year. I think we can all agree on that. That's not really a hot take. It's a very lukewarm take, but
yeah,
it's not saying much as a 30-something-year-old fullback. But it's refreshing to see that, because I'm always worried that they never drafted anyone to take over for LaShawn McCoy when he's gone. But with guys like this, guys that they're finding in undrafted, free agents and off practice squads, hey.
And they all had their moments. There was moments for literally every one of them where you looked at him and went, oh, all right.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
The limited catches and carries, that Ivory guy looked pretty good. Cadet. Yeah, it looked good. It was promising. Let's say that.
Well, again, we don't know if they're playing against, second team, third team. Where does that fall out in terms of what they're playing against? But there's really nothing to look good.
Yeah.
I couldn't have been happier to see them actually each get some moments.
So there's something in general with preseason games that you just kind of touched on, is you can always take it with a grain of salt. And so, like, that's how we always convinced ourselves through the last 18 preseasons or whatever before this preseason, was like, well, the offense didn't do great, but, they weren't giving away their whole playbook. And I guess my counter argument to that was, well, I'd feel a lot better if they did well as opposed to, even though, this doesn't count and they aren't using it, as opposed to not doing well and just hoping that they're going to do well. Because at least if they're doing well, they're actually, carrying through the game plan. They're executing the plays the way that they should be. And even though they're playing against, a defense that's pretty vanilla or whatever, I'd rather see them successful against a vanilla defense than get trounced by them. So even though you can't say it's the outcome is going to be great, this feels so much better than a game where we've watched before where they've lost 28-7 in the preseason. You just have to justify yourself. Well, it's preseason. Like they look good.
No, I agree. And then that's what especially with a quarterback competition going on, you're going to see a little bit more heightened intensity from the quarterbacks, all wanting to make their mark and wanting to look good no matter what team they're playing, be it the second stringers or third stringers. They want to make sure that they're looking good. So that adds to a little bit of the fun. But I agree. Just watching, making sure they're executing plays correctly and all of that, that's really what we're looking for and hoping that and I think they did. I think they did tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nate Peterman got the start. We both thought he looked pretty good, a lot better than, obviously he looked last season. But, he was a rookie last season, new system, maybe something that plays to his strengths more. A.J. McCarron comes in.
Can I give you a hot take?
Hot take.
It was a lot of fun. When he came in, and I said this while we were watching the game, it was really interesting to see the different dynamic of when Peterman was playing. It seemed very... like in the pocket,
like rhythmic, right? Rhythmic,
but in the pocket, it was very, very stoic, if you will. But it was like competent, and obviously working out because everything went well there. But then A.J. McCarron comes in, and he's all over the place, running and gunning and throwing and making plays, and it just seemed like the whole field just went chaotic in a really fun way to watch.
A fun way, yeah.
Now, is that good? I don't know, but it was definitely kind of interesting to see that difference in personality of the game when he came into the fold.
Yes, absolutely. I will say that in the first play he was sacked. I'm like, oh great, this isn't going to go well. But you're right. So what I will say to that for your point about things being chaotic and going, I mean, one of the things I've been reading about is he's been throwing a lot into traffic. Like getting his receivers laid out. I think that's why Malachi Dupre isn't playing today and Cam Phillips didn't really get a lot of snaps, is because they're nursing injuries from getting laid out across the middle. So, and we didn't see a whole lot of that. We saw a little bit of traffic and the guys getting caught or catching the ball and getting tackled right away. But then he also had some really good plays. He found Brandon Riley wide open, and there was like a 50-yard gain. It was amazing. So I agree. So it's funny now that you mention that. So you have the very like rhythmic, not very fancy Nathan Peterman, and then you have a little bit more of an unconventional A.J. McCarron, and then you have Josh Allen, who's like the most unconventional out of all three of them, taking the third spot. So, but I mean, going back to what you're saying, A.J. McCarron, I mean, the running game was still doing well. A.J. did pretty well. He was running a little bit too. Getting outside the pocket.
And how much is that too? And let's go back to the word chaotic that I use. How much is that due to him needing to break out of the pocket, or the fact that the second string offensive line wasn't maybe as effective?
Yeah.
And he had no choice but to break those plays and to shake it up a little bit. So that's where it gets harder to evaluate. Mm-hmm. But I just thought it was funny because this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun to watch. You didn't know what was going to happen. It was interesting. It was chaotic. It was probably like,
dynamic.
Yeah, traffic accident. You're like, is somebody hurt or is that just,
I can't look away.
I can't look away. I'm just going to. So then now we go into Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, which we thought was going to be the third string because he'd been that the entire week for the most part in team activities and training camp. He was with the third string offense. And I will say, going back to A.J. McCarron real quick, I thought this, for the most part, the offensive line did pretty good in the second team.
Yeah.
I mean, in years past, we've seen the first team, offensive line just get manhandled. And then you're like, well, the second and third team's not going to be any better. And they aren't. And they weren't. But and the third offensive line isn't nearly as good as we saw while watching Josh Allen. But I mean, what did you think of Josh Allen? First impression, seeing him in a uniform, seeing him in pads, the way that he threw the ball. What did you think?
I thought he was good. I mean, he looks like a rookie. I mean, it was clear that he's a rookie. He made some pretty bad mistakes. He did some interesting things. It was clear that he wanted to show off the arm and really heaved it down there a few times to varying success. So I would say for a first game and the first experience of seeing a real NFL, this speed of an NFL game, I think he did pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. For first time on the field, I mean, it wasn't a train wreck. It wasn't 5 interceptions, which isn't fair to Nathan Peter. But it was like he hit Ray McLeod over the middle, which was a great pass.
That was a great
pass. It was
pass.
Just right where the linebacker couldn't get to it.
Right in step too.
In step two, exactly. And speaking of in step, we did see A.J. McCarron and Nathan Peterman have issues throwing behind guys as they were crossing.
Yes.
One led to an interception.
Yep.
Tip balls. I mean. And it didn't seem like Josh Allen, had those issues. And then he also, though, did a very rookie thing. I mean, he was getting chased out of the pocket. He thought he could elude the pass rusher coming after him, and he even went back even more yards, probably like 20 yards past the line of scrimmage, or, back behind the line of scrimmage. And then he kind of chucked up some weird over, as he was going down, and it almost got picked off. And
that should have been an interception.
It should have been an interception. It should have been a taint, really, so.
It was there was one play that he got hit and he got knocked to the ground, and I just feel like the announcers should have been saying, he's just realizing they hit really hard.
A lot more in Wyoming than Wyoming, right? Jeez.
I don't know if you know this, but these guys they hit really hard.
Isn't that crazy? Like the third string defensive end in Carolina is probably the best competition he's ever seen. It could be.
Yeah.
Like, you never know. Welcome to the NFL, Rook. It's so I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah,
for the most part. I'm excited.
No complaints. He's not starting week 1.
No, he's not.
Not even close, but I'm not disappointed.
So that leads us into, I mean, we did a recap of the game. There's not a ton to take from it, but it intrigues us. The offense looked pretty good. The defense looked, as well as we thought it would do. When should Josh Allen start the season? And, should he start at all?
Well, what's your hypothetical here? Are we talking about either Peterman or McCarron coming in and clearly looking like NFL quarterbacks that can lead a team? Are they, putting W's on the board and looking like they're getting things done? Or do we have these two guys just kind of maybe doing okay, but not really impressing, or just flat out losing?
Well, I think you should change your scenario based on whatever outcome you're talking about. So, obviously, if we have A.J. McCarron or Nathan Peterman, looking like a competent quarterback, at least 500 or above, I feel like you have to keep him in and let Josh Allen. My opinion on this whole thing is that you should always let your quarterback stay as long as possible, especially in this situation where he's not clearly better than the two ahead of him yet. And he came out of college as a raw prospect. So he wasn't like Cam Newton who just won a national championship. It wasn't like Deshaun Watson and Marcus Mariota, all those guys that had prolific college careers and were just taking it to the next level and were clearly the best players on their team when they got there. So I always think I'm of the opinion that you should definitely let your guys sit as long as possible.
I agree with that. I think what's possibly going to happen if you look at the schedule is pretty tough in the opening weeks.
Oh yeah, it's rough up until about week 9.
Yes, I was actually going to go till week 5, just giving a little bit of wiggle room. So I think if things go poorly in those first 4 or 5 weeks, like they very well could, I think there's going to be some pressure to put him in and see what he does. But I think if it were me and things are going okay, like you said, let him wait as long as possible. If you've completely lost the season, it's clear that the season is not going anywhere, let him play the rest of the season to get the time.
Yes. And
build the confidence and build the, just the experience that he needs to go forward. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I think the reasoning I guess I have behind him sitting is that you can't ruin a quarterback by having him wait, as opposed to you can ruin him by throwing him in too early. So, there's a lot of opinion that David Carr was a better quarterback than he actually ended up being because his offensive line was so poor. He was always getting hit and injured and whatever. It was just the game was too fast for him. He wasn't ready for it, and it just ruined him. So, I mean, I look at other quarterbacks that have waited and, some that haven't. And sure, some of them have had success. But I've never heard of a quarterback waiting too long, and then I just missed my chance. I missed my opportunity. I was waiting 2 years behind this guy. So
I think
the cream always rises to the top, no matter what. Just as long as you don't burn the cream too quickly or something. I don't know.
Hit me with the dairy. All right. I think yes and no. I think that if you put the guy in and it clearly looks like he's over his head, maybe like Nate Peterman last year.
Yeah.
Then you go, okay, too early. Don't do that again.
Yes.
So then you wait a little bit longer, but I 100% think that you can put him in, just kind of gauge, get a little more experience, and even if it's putting him in for a half. If the season's done,
if the season's done. So yeah, if the season's done, that's the only time you would be okay with it, right? 0-5, pretty much not going to make the playoffs.
Right.
Let's see what we got in this kid.
Right.
Okay.
And then if he starts to crack a little bit, all right, bring him out, throw the other guys in. So I think that would be a decent way to do it. But I agree, if you put him into a situation where he's just going to fail for 7 games because there's nothing on the line and he has no one helping him, that's not really good. I mean, we saw what happened to Trent Edwards after his concussion.
Oh, I know. Well, speaking of that, give Nate Peterman credit. I mean, the guy had the worst performance.
He's a record holder.
He was absolutely terrible in that game, and he could possibly be the starting quarterback this season after beating out, the 7th overall pick in the draft, and another guy who was. I don't know. I think there's something to be said for him for making a comeback and not just turtling and just his career just ending.
No, he gets a lot of points for perseverance, and that's something I've read about him is that he's got confidence. Mm-hmm. He gets it. He understands the game, and he's confident in his own abilities, and so he's seemingly put it past him, and I think he's got something to hang his hat on today.
Good. Good. Awesome. So, speaking of dairy, we're talking about, cream rising to the top. Obviously you're a friend of mine, you're a Bills fan, but you're not from the area. You're not from Western New York whatsoever.
No.
You're pretty far away. You're not in Bills country at all.
I grew up in Giants and Jets country in a small town. I grew up on a dairy farm, and actually no one in my family watched sports whatsoever. So I wasn't even exposed to football except for when my aunt and uncle came. They lived in Orchard Park, had season tickets to the Bills. And when they would come down, holidays and various times, always would have to have the football games on. So that's when I started watching football. And of course, they're Bills fans. And so they indoctrinated me into being a Bills fan. Mm-hmm. And so everyone else around me was Giants and Jets.
Yeah.
And I was like, why does nobody like the Bills? And then I came to school out here to RIT, and then everybody was Bills fans.
Yeah.
Although in RIT there's a little more diversity to where I group with a bunch of different things, but it's very interesting to be in the different areas to where, especially during the Super Bowl years, there was not a lot of support outside of Western New York in terms of people wanting the Bills to win.
Everyone wanted the Bills to lose, huh?
Every time, even like the first time.
Really?
And by the fourth time, people were just angry.
Yeah, of course. They're like, why do we have to watch them again?
But the great thing about those years for me was more Bills games were televised in my area, because I only got to see Bills games if they didn't happen to correspond with the Giants or Jets games, or if they were in the playoffs. Obviously, you're going to get to see those games. So I was very happy that they had playoff games that I got to watch the Bills more, and obviously those were exciting games. So yeah, being a transplant into Bills country, I'm not special anymore.
Yeah, well, I thought that was always interesting that you were a Bills fan, because I'm like, wait, where you came from is definitely Giants, because the middle of the state is for the most part like Syracuse and that area is, and then you keep going further where you grew up.
Yeah, it's the foothills of the Catskills. So if anyone's geographically familiar, it's near Oneonta.
Yeah,
and that's even a city that's bigger than the one I grew up in.
How far is that from New York City? Couple hours?
By car, it takes around 3.5, 4 hours through the Catskill Mountains.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, so you're okay, gotcha. You're like north of Albany then.
No.
South?
Hour and a half southwest.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So New York is flat across the bottom.
New geography lesson, okay.
And then it dips down to New York City.
Yes.
So right where that crease is, where it starts to dip down, I live just north of that crease.
You live right in the crotch of New York State?
All right. That's
a little too much. Is that too far? Okay.
That's enough. I let the cream thing go.
No, that's cool. It's funny because when I first met you and we became friends, like, I just thought you were just from the area because you were a Bills fan. It's just natural. And that's something that, you don't see a lot of people become Bills fans that aren't from the area. Because why?
Why would you?
Why? Why would you?
Why would you do that to yourself?
I mean, not for nothing. It's just been a very rough stretch up until this last season. So, I mean, in saying that, like, how amazing was it for you to watch them end the drought after following them as a kid, up until...
Oh, it was great that they ended the drought, but I had a weird mixed feeling about it because of all the controversy of things going on with when they pulled Tyrod that game. Yeah. And I feel like, and it goes back to something I said earlier about the coaches keep making excuses. We're rebuilding. Don't expect anything from us. Yeah. And it was almost like they were irritated that they were winning. They're like, come on, we don't have to deal with this year, because then we're gonna have to do it next year too.
Yeah, we want a high pick. I don't understand.
Well, let's give us a chance to, these guys aren't supposed to win.
We are just coaching way too well.
So it has that weird sort of aura to it that I can't shake for some reason.
Yeah,
I can't.
Well, if they really didn't want to win, they would have kept Nathan Peterman in for the rest of that game, and the rest.
You can't keep him in that game. Even if you're trying to lose,
never get another head coaching job in your entire life.
But I think that was the thing that really was frustrating about last year. And there's controversy about Tyrod. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he the thing that was frustrating is it was very clear that Dennison didn't want to coach him.
Yeah,
he didn't want him.
No.
He wanted his own guy. It's like, no, you have to play with the guy you got.
Yes, exactly.
But he didn't want to do that, and it was very clear. So that was the very frustrating thing. Plus, then you've got all the Bills fans, and I've said this term to you before, are a big believer in Schrodinger's quarterback.
Oh yeah, yep.
which is a quantum physics experiment to where you put a cat in a box with a poison and you close the box up. The cat is both simultaneously alive and dead at the same time because you don't know.
You don't know what happened.
And until you observe what's happened, you don't know. And that's what Peterman was. He's the best quarterback ever because we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All we have is what we saw in like training camp. We don't know how he's going to react on the big game, during the big dance floor. So then we open the box and we're like, oh,
yeah,
he's not better than Tyrod.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's been
At that moment.
That's been every quarterback for the last,
That's what I mean.
years.
It seems like the Bills have that sort of mentality.
Yes.
To where very quick.
You mean Bills fans or the Bills coaching staff?
Oh, a little of both.
A little of both. I mean, I feel like Bills fans,
different coaches at different times.
I mean, Jeff Toole was a thing. Remember, Jeff Toole was like, oh yeah, this undrafted guy out of Washington or Washington State. He's going to the next coming. It's not Tyrod. It's this kid.
So here's a thought experiment for you. Put Tyrod into the game that we saw tonight against an offensive line that's looking pretty good, having Kelvin Benjamin in the lineup, having people that he could throw to. What do you think he does?
I don't want to hash out Tyrod Taylor.
No, I mean that's the thought experiment of it.
So the fun experiment. So I know you were a Tyrod supporter, so I know that going into it.
I never claimed he was Brady.
This is like talking politics because
Everyone
will
has
never
the
be
on-off.
Exactly. I will never be convinced that I thought Tyrod was a good quarterback. I don't think he was terrible. Like I think he was a great game manager, and that's might be the ceiling of like all three of our quarterbacks right now.
Right.
Is game manager. So I think he was good enough at that, and then but that was like his max ceiling.
No, I've never said that he's the most amazing guy ever, but I just knew he was the guy who was getting it done, and he had a couple bad games, and he didn't have a lot of support. They stripped him of everything. So that's where I'm curious to see how he does in Cleveland.
And I am very curious to see how he does in Cleveland, especially with definitely he has weapons. He's Jarvis Landry, he's Josh Gordon,
So now's his time to really show me if we were stupid to get rid of him or not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll be eating, crow if he ends up being, a quarterback that can get them to the play. If you get to the Browns to the playoff, the team that's been 1-31 the last two seasons, if you get them to the playoffs, you're a good quarterback.
Yeah.
Like you just are. You are. No matter what they've done in the draft, no matter what, you are just a good quarterback.
So I've officially turned into one of my good friends who still to this day brings up J.P. Lossman.
Oh, does somebody still bring up J.P. Lossman? There's still a lot of J.P. Lossman truthers out there.
Yes, exactly.
Didn't think he'd get a fair shot. One of my good friends, Bill, is like that. Yeah.
To this day,
we all have a buddy.
It's like this is like a decade ago, man. We can let this one go, right?
Exactly. So
that's the last time you'll hear me talk about Tyrod.
Or J.P. Lossman, hopefully.
Oh, no, I'll bring him up every time.
Oh, man. So that's a really cool story that you actually became a Bills fan. Well, not even being from the area and actually coming to the area. So let's talk. So we were talking about Tyrod in Cleveland really quick and weapons and, see what he does with this kind of offense. They actually just got rid of one of their weapons recently. They basically gave him away. Corey Coleman. The Bills traded with the Cleveland Browns to acquire former first-round pick Corey Coleman this week for a 2020 seventh-round pick, which is like 2 years from now, a seventh-round pick. This is which is worth less than a seventh-round pick next year. I mean, it's almost nothing, really. I mean, if you think about it, the Bills have more draft equity in Ray McLeod, who they got in the 6th round this year, and then Austin Proehl, they got in the 7th round this year. Those guys are worth more than what they gave up for Corey Coleman. So, I mean, what did you think of the trade? What were your thoughts on it? Did you like it?
I
mean, obviously, we didn't see him tonight. I'll say that right now. He was not on the field. But
I don't have a ton of opinion. I don't really know Coleman that well. I mean, I read how both of his hands have been broken, which for a receiver, that could be problematic. It just makes you wonder why. Like, why would they make this trade? It just seems like, does he have Ebola and is going to wipe out the entire Bills team?
Oh, why would the Browns make the trade, or why would the Bills make the trade?
Where's the motive? Yeah, the Bills is fine. They're like, oh, all right.
We need a warm bye.
I guess he'll be sure.
Yeah,
that's what you want. You sure you don't want more? All right, we'll take him. But what are the Browns getting? Like, why?
I know.
And that's why I say he might have Ebola, so he goes into the locker room and the whole Bills team is gone. And then we're back to the movie The Replacements.
So I'm very curious as to why they got rid of him, and I was listening. I was reading some Browns blog reporters, and they were saying, someone, Jake Burns of the Orange and Brown Report, tweeted that this after the trade. He's like, if you actually watch Corey Coleman's 19 games and don't see a guy who can produce, then you're lost. Check the targets. Check each one. He can play. QB issues were massive. I can accept injury history and off the field issues we don't know about, but the football player can play. Whereas on WGR, they interviewed one of the color commentary guys from the Cleveland Browns, and the guy's like, this kid's got issues. He's not motivated. He had an off-field thing where like him and his buddies, apparently, we don't know what his involvement was, but his buddies like beat the crap out of somebody at like a garage in Cleveland, like really, really hurt him. So you get both sides. It's very controversial. It's almost like Josh Allen.
But that's another question too, is because this coach, McDermott, I mean, they're known to look for the right guys, the guys with the right personalities, the right attitudes, the right drive. I mean, we saw the little clip of their,
the embedded
thing,
series, the mini series that's coming up.
The Hard Knocks-esque version that they're doing, and that's what we've always kind of thought as they've made these moves of getting rid of big guys and big players that you're like, what are you getting rid of that guy for? And really thought that they took time to tell if a person's going to fit in the team, fit in the room. And was he vetted like that, or is it just something to where they just needed wide receivers so badly they just went, okay.
Yeah, this is basically
we're going to take the good with the bad with this and see how it goes. But that just seems unlikely from what we know.
So I think it has a couple of things to do with that. It has to do with the fact that I'm sure Brandon Beane had scouted, Corey Coleman coming out of college at Baylor when he was out there. So he probably knew what in his opinion, his draft stock was up until that point. And he probably was looking for people. He has a relationship with the Browns GM. They traded Tyrod Taylor. So he probably called him up, or vice versa. Called him up, hey, do you want this guy? We're not looking for a whole lot. We think we have a guy that can replace him. Do you want him? And, Brandon Beane thinking, hey, he might not have fit the process because you can't tell, really. You can't get in the locker room with these guys. And people are saying, well, he's from Cleveland. What do you expect? Well, Jordan Poyer came from Cleveland too, and he did really well with the Bills. He was not this Pro Bowl level sort of guy coming out of Cleveland. He came here, better coaching staff, and that's essentially what Sean McDermott had said in one of the press conferences. So I don't know. I don't know what the Browns were thinking. It must have been something not fitting in their system, and the Bills were thinking, well, it doesn't take a whole lot to acquire this kind of potential talent.
No, they got a good bargain, and I'm not going to fault the Bills' end of this at all. It's just very curious.
It doesn't sound like he fits the process.
But then again, they brought Incognito on.
That's right.
And he did great.
Well, this regime didn't bring in Incognito, but they kept him. They liked him. They weren't going to cut him.
Oh, that's right. They didn't, did they?
No, Rex Ryan did, but whatever.
That's fine.
It's okay. It's okay. You don't know the Bills' history, but it's okay. So I mean, there's a couple of reasons. So let me go into real quick why I like the trade. Because the Bills finally have a speed threat now at the wide receiver, a proven speed threat. He had a 4.37 40 at his Baylor Pro Day. He was a Blitnikoff winner, which is basically for the best wide receiver in college football. The Bills don't have any of those on their roster right now. He has 2 years left on his rookie deal and another year if the Bills want to give him the option. So he's not just a rental player. They can decide, is this guy worth keeping? He's a very cheap contract. It is a rookie contract. So it's very cheap. Zay Jones is still not 100%. We don't know where he's going to be. Speaking of not being part of the process or whatever, I mean, his off the field issues this last season. I mean, geez. And he's still not back from the injury, not that he sustained from football or practice or working out. It was from that hotel incident. So they don't know what's going on with there. I'm sure everyone is listening to this podcast, and you and me, we've all been reading all of the, the notes about wide receivers, because I put a poll on Twitter. If you're not following us, please follow us at CTW Pod. We almost have 1,000 followers. So, shout out to you if you could become our 1,000th follower. But I put a poll out there. I said, what position are you going to be watching in the first preseason game most? Is it going to be offensive line, wide receiver, defensive end? I forget what the last one was. And I was by far wide receiver. Who's going to watch? And every time there'd be an update, it'd be like, oh, Cam Phillips looks good. Malachi Dupre looks good. It's like, it is not a good sign when all of these undrafted rookie free agents are looking to possibly make the roster. That is a very bad sign, not because these guys aren't talented. They might be very talented, but you should not have to rely on rookies, much less undrafted rookies, to make up your wide receiver position. So, I mean, I look at that and, the Bills need it. And not only that, as far as wide receiver goes, wide receiver is one of those positions, just in general, I know because we play fantasy football, third year tends to be the breakout year for a wide receiver. This is Corey Coleman's third year. So that's a big thing. I mean, a lot of these guys, even if they are undrafted free agents, I mean, we saw with Zay Jones last season, he was one of the most accomplished college wide receivers coming out, but he couldn't catch anything last season. He was lost. And that's what happens when you push these guys into a position where they're undrafted, they're rookies, and you try to make them, unless you're Julio Jones or AJ Green, one of the best in the game, you struggle. There's lots of different concepts. There's routes. The playbook's different. It's just a lot different. Whereas, so having a guy like Corey Coleman can only help this wide receiver group. Now, instead of having, Zay Jones, Kelvin Benjamin, maybe hopefully healthy Zay Jones, Kelvin Benjamin, Jeremy Curley, now you have a fourth guy that is also starter potential. So, I mean, I really like the trade for what they had to give up for it. Now, if you're telling me they gave up a 5th round pick or something, I'd be like, yeah, it's a little too much, but I liked it. So, next topic was something interesting that happened. So I live right near training camp here in Rochester, and I was out one night getting groceries and noticed some rookie hazing. So real quick, before we get into this specific story.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about this.
Have you ever been hazed before? What do you think of when you think of hazing?
I usually think of like, the fraternity type stuff to where, I think of that sort of thing. I personally have not, well, maybe I've been hazed. I don't know. I grew up with a bunch of farmers and we played basketball really rough. But I mean, other than that, it wasn't anything like, yeah. So I don't know. I don't have any idea of the story that you're talking about.
So when I think of hazing, I was in a fraternity in college. So I think of that, which obviously wasn't that bad or anything like that. But I think of, like, you ever see those videos on 60 Minutes where they're hazing like Air Force or Navy or Army guys, people in the military, and they're just like in a hallway and they're all doing like standing or sitting chairs and like, against the wall, and then they're getting pinned against and getting yelled at and screamed at. That's what you think of, like, with hazing a little bit. In my fraternity, there was something like that. There were certain things that we had to do. It wasn't anything bad, obviously.
I don't think that's obviously, but
no,
it's good to hear.
No, at least in mine. I mean, other people have like, I've heard of experiences where people, without getting too graphic, like one of the lesser, the stories that's not too bad is like, people get branded like when they join a fraternity. It was like, why? Like, that sounds terrible. I wouldn't want that to be done stuff like that. So, but at the same time, like, we're talking, that's an extreme of hazing. There's also times where I think hazing can be a good thing. So, like, I'll tell you a story real quick. I used to work construction. When I was in college, I would work construction over the summers. My dad was an electrician, so I would, go out and work summer help. I'd help them, run conduit or whatever. And those guys were jerks. They were straight up assholes. And a lot of it had to do with because I was just a summer helper. I was less than an apprentice. And I was just basically, here, move that pile of material from there to there, move it from that job site, do all the work. They wouldn't teach me the really skilled work, obviously. But, and it was funny because, like, I didn't dread it, but I was like, some of the guys took it like they're just like total assholes. But some of the guys just wouldn't talk to you, or they'd make fun of you. They'd rib you all the time. But by the end of it, when all was said and done, like, everything was good. They were like, it was like a rite of passage. They all did it to become journeyman or whatever, whether you're a pipe fitter, and they all did it. It wasn't like just the electricians, like the pipe fitters would join in on it. I was just like, but it actually taught me a lot of like character too, because, it was a humbling experience. You're not used to that. That never really happens to you, except like maybe if you get bullied a little bit in high school, but so it was interesting. That's one of the reasons why I joined a fraternity, because I'm like, wow, with the right guys, it's something worthwhile, because how else do you prove if someone wants to be part of your organization or your fraternity or your whatever, unless you put them through something in a short amount of time and they go along with it? You're like, okay, this is what I had to do. This is what you go through. It's just part of it, right? So, like, stories about like Des Bryant. Like, Des Bryant wouldn't carry pads in practice. He's like, I'm not here. He's like, I'm not here to carry pads. I'm here to play football, which makes sense, but it didn't go over so well. Ryan Leaf had the very famous story of, back in the day, they used to have, the first round draft pick pay for dinner for the offensive lineman or whatever, and it'd be thousands of dollars. They put it on the rookie's credit card. He wouldn't do it. He just wouldn't do it because he's like, I don't have to do that. I don't care. I'm Ryan Leaf. And how well did that turn out? So there's certain things to be said about, going along with it. It's not harmful.
I'm really curious if this is going to be like a good type of hazing or a bad type of hazing.
Have I led through it? I mean,
you're
people
building the tension.
People are skipping the 15-second mark to get this. Come on, get to the story, Nate. So I'm at a grocery store around here. And it's late at night. It's like 8 o'clock on a weekday. So just picking up some groceries. And I noticed someone that looks like a player that just came off the practice field. He's wearing athletic tights. He's wearing red, what I would imagine, cleat-like shoes. They weren't cleats, but, there's definitely a guy that either just got done working out or was a Bills rookie. And it was literally like a half mile away from the store or the training camp. And so I'm like, I'm not in any hurry to get back home. I'm going to kind of watch what this guy gets because I know how strict these coaches are about diet. I mean, they have all their food at the training. What is this guy getting?
You stalked this gentleman in the grocery store.
I wouldn't say stalked, like as in I followed him down every aisle. But
he was never out of sight.
I kept tabs on him. There was 10 people in the store. I kind of knew where he was. What's he going through? Which aisle is he going? Is this guy? I mean, have you ever wondered what an actual NFL player eats?
Sure.
Especially what a rookie eats. I mean, an NFL veteran probably eats very well in his 30s. That's how you stay in the league. But like a rookie, I mean, they could be eating Skittles every day, right? So, so I'm watching him. Is he going to make it to the vegetable aisle? Is he going to go get some fruit? Is he going to buy some cereal? What is he getting? So I make it all the way down, up and back. I'm going down the aisles. I'm done getting groceries. I haven't seen him in a while. I come back. He's in the same spot I saw him, which is in the candy aisle. And he had, no joke, I've never seen anyone have so much candy in their cart. It was ridiculous. His entire shopping cart. And not one of those half shopping carts, like a full shopping cart with Reese's Pieces, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Kit Kats, whatever, M&Ms. It was full of just junk, chips and whatever. And I was like, and at first I didn't recognize who it was at first. And I'm not going to say his name because why? What good does it do? I won't say if he was drafted or undrafted, but he's definitely a rookie, and I guarantee he was getting that for the veterans. Either he lost a bet or he didn't do something in practice and he needed to, so he drew the short stick, but he was picking up candy for all those veterans.
This is probably...
And it must have been hundreds of dollars. Like, this is... Like, you go to a nice, grocery store haul, it's probably like $100, right? This is probably like $300-400 worth of candy.
So I was listening to another podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with it, at the Pete and Sebastian podcast.
Okay, no.
Sebastian Maniscalco, comedian, as is Pete Corielli. They're good friends with J.J. Watt. And literally this week's episode, J.J. Watt called in, and they asked him this specific question about, what do you do to the rookies? What do they have to do? And it was almost all of the things that you mentioned. Like, they're responsible for getting the pads off the field. They're responsible for the food for all the older guys, and then at the end of the camp, the defensive guys all go out, and the rookie has to pay for the steak dinner, and so they're always scared at how much these huge 300-pound guys are going to be putting away at the nice steakhouse. Yeah. So it was all the things that you had just mentioned. So it's kind of funny how that kind of relayed into something I just heard.
That's funny. It was kind of interesting to see that actually happen, to see it in person. And, I could tell he was a rookie because he had no idea where he was looking in the grocery store. Like, is this, is this aisle, this? It's like anyone that's been to like a Tops or Wegmans knows exactly where everything is. But no, it was kind of interesting. I thought that was funny. And yeah, that was definitely not following the process. I'm sure that wasn't part of their diet regimen. A 10-pound bag of Oreo cookies.
But to your point, though, I think it builds that camaraderie, and J.J. Watt kind of echoed that too. Is like, as long as guys aren't being jerks about it, generally speaking, it's pretty easy going with just some of the basic things. But if the guys are jerks about it, then sometimes they might, just be mean to them. I don't know.
Yeah, and how bad would that look if they asked you to do something and you said no?
Not good, especially you're trying to make the team.
Exactly. You're trying to make the team. You're trying to get in good with your teammates. You want to fit in.
So that's funny that you had a real life. I don't approve of your stalking tendencies, and we might have to have a little talk after the podcast. But
yeah, I'm sure he probably was thinking, "Who's this dude? Why is he following me?"
I'm sure you had like full Bills regalia on too, like the Bills shirt and
Oh yeah. Of course, my Circling the Wagons t-shirt. Yep. So what's weird is, here I am, like trying to eat healthy. Like, I'm not in great shape. I'm not in terrible shape, but I'm not in great shape. And like I have like chicken breasts and Brussels sprouts and stuff like this. And this guy's just loading up on candy, probably in better shape than I've ever been in my entire life or ever will be. And it's just funny because I'm like, I'm so jealous. I know he's getting it for like these 300-pound linemen, but
He burned 10,000 calories in practice today and is made of muscle that needs
I
fuel.
know. I know.
You, my friend, burned 37 calories today. And
it's hell getting old, man.
yeah, it's not great.
So yeah, I think, man, that was really interesting. I think we're going to end on that note, just based on time. But recapping everything, it was a really interesting first game. I mean, normally, how preseason games go, the first one, the starter gets very little time. And then it's not till like really the third preseason game where the starter gets the most amount of time. And it's very possible we might see AJ McCarron start preseason game number 2.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And flip-flop that way. And, it's possible that they said that they were hoping by preseason game number 3 they know who their starter is. But let's say they choose AJ McCarron, and he gets, I think they usually give him the first half, right? The starting quarterback first. What happens if he sucks? And Nathan Peterman looks pretty good in the third quarter. It's like, well, maybe you have to reassess if AJ McCarron should be your starting quarterback or Nathan Peterman or vice versa.
Well, the funny thing is they're playing the Browns next. So I wonder if Coleman will be playing.
Ooh, yeah.
And then the third game so the big game would be against the Bengals, and that's no joke. No. I mean, they're a decent team, so it should be interesting.
It should be interesting. And I did hear,
and McCarron used to be the underling of Dalton, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
So that's another interesting
interesting storyline.
I'm sure they would just go hug on the field as opposed to almost get into a fight like Kelvin Benjamin.
I guarantee, and I don't know if that one's. Excuse me, I think it's at home, too. So I believe that's in Buffalo, that Cincinnati Bengals game.
You are correct.
Oh, good. Well, I guarantee Andy Dalton gets a standing ovation.
That's true, because he did get us to the playoffs.
Yeah, rightfully so. He should. I mean, I'm going to be giving him one from my living room couch.
Like, it's okay if you beat us today.
I want you to beat us. That's how much I love you. So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting story. And I did hear that the final count on the amount of money that Bills fans gave to Andy Dalton's charity was over $400,000.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. I'm proud to be a Bills fan. Just stuff like that. And he's going to show up at the Children's Hospital, and he's going to do something there too.
Oh, that's cool.
Like something, an extension of his charity and stuff like that. So it's a great story. I mean, the Bills have a relationship with the Bengals. I mean, they did trading with them. They traded Cordy Glenn to the Bengals. So yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting. So this first leg of the preseason is over with, and we don't have a ton of answers, but at least we're not shaking our head thinking, I don't even know who's going to be starting quarterback. We have options.
Do you think that this new embedded show is going to shine any light on that? Because I think it'll be interesting to see the behind the scenes of how people act and how people interact, and obviously how the coaches coach and interact. I'm very curious for this show and what it shines light on for us as more than casual fans.
Yeah. I'm going to be embedded. That's for sure. It's going to be very, absolutely. I love that. Now I don't watch Hard Knocks. You're a huge fan.
Oh, I love it.
So you've got to be even more jacked than I am for this.
And before I even found out about the embedded, I was going to bring up on here is that I really wish that the Bills would do Hard Knocks some year. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden a link pops up about the embedded. I was like, yes.
They could tell you. They knew what you were thinking. And it's from the same production group that did, I don't know if you've seen the Playoff Caliber. It's like a 30-minute thing. It's on YouTube. It's on our YouTube page if you look at one of our playlists, where they basically go over everything from it's documentary style of how the drought ended, like the moment it ended. It captures footage from, all those different bars and people's homes when Andy Dalton had the touchdown from the Bills locker room. It is so well done. The director or producer that did the Four Falls of Buffalo, the 30 for 30 special.
That was awesome.
So this is the same group that did this. They did a Ryan Groy quick documentary about his life. It was only like an 8-minute video, but it was really well done. I mean, this group whoever they are. I mean, I like documentaries. You like documentaries. Like, they did a great job.
Well, just from the preview that we saw, I mean, it's very reminiscent of the Hard Knocks quality. I think the only difference is you get the NFL who does the voiceovers for the NFL film stuff I think he does the Hard Knocks stuff.
Oh, okay.
But no, I mean, it looks fantastic, and I'm really excited to kind of see behind the curtain for once.
Yeah. Very nice. All right, cool. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for watching the game with me, man. It was great to have you. It
was a good time.
It was good to talk Bills with you. And thanks for doing some voiceover work, man. It's really good.
Anytime.
Hey. Nick, we'll have to do this again. So for us at the Circling the Wagons podcast, for Nick.
Go Bills.
And for me, Nate, go Bills. We'll talk to you guys again soon. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Circling the Wagons podcast. Download and subscribe to us in your favorite podcast service. Email us at ctwpod@gmail.com. That's Charlie Tango Whiskey Pod@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter @CTWPod. And most importantly, go Bills!
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.